Coming up, we're going to be talking about this controversial pit bull muzzle ordinance, and Ali Simona is going to be joining us to talk about that. But right now, we're so pleased that Steve Murphy, Democrat running for state treasurer, was able to stop by after a full day of activity in the Worcester area. Steve, thanks.
Thanks, Hank. It's a pleasure to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. Been by the radio show, and we appreciate that as well. Hey, what is it, what is it like? I mean, you've been a Boston City Councilor, so you certainly know the rough and tumble of politics, because running for Boston City Council lets you know about that. But here you are running statewide. I mean, is it different when you go to the Berkshires? Is it different when you spend the day in Central Mass?
It's bigger than it looks on a map. Let's put it that way. The old Johnny Cash. I've been everywhere, man.
Yeah.
And it's exciting, though. I mean, people are still hurting out there. The economy is what it is, from the eastern part of the state through the central, through the west.
So the issue is the same wherever you go.
It's economy, it's jobs, and it's how do we get ourselves spurring that economy and putting people back to work. And I've had some experience doing that as an elected official in my own neck of the woods, and I'm trying to bring some of that public finance experience to the four corners of the Commonwealth.
All right. Steve, what do you think of the economy right now in Massachusetts? Some days I read articles in the Globe and they make it seem as if, Massachusetts is on the road to recovery and we're creating new jobs in the private sector. But my gut feeling and just talking to friends and neighbors is that we don't really feel that there's a recovery yet.
It's interesting, Hank. I think it's been an international and national recession. And I think everybody kind of looks and says, well, how do we compare with another state? And they're looking around in a national viewpoint and say Massachusetts isn't as bad off as others. But we're hurting too. And we're hurting in the construction sector, certainly, in the private sector and building, and even in the public sector, because as the economy turns, there's less resources to put forward. We have issues moving forward in the public finance area around pensions and around health care for our workers. And those pieces of our segment of revenue are being eaten up more and more by those pieces. So we have less money to spend on programmatic needs, whether they're public safety needs, educational needs, et cetera. And we've got to look at the matrix that we're using. There's going to have to be some changes.
Now, if I had a candidate for governor, if I had a candidate for state representative, they would have just told me the same thing, that wherever they're going in the state or in their district, people are talking about the economy.
I think so.
What can you do as treasurer? I mean, what does that office do that could help us come out of this?
Well, a couple things. One of the things that big banks aren't loaning. They haven't been. We bailed them out back in 2008. We bailed out some of the biggest banks, and they sat on the money and then paid themselves bonuses when they raised our credit card interest to get the money back. So I want to move some of that money that we control, the Treasurer controls, and the MMDT, the Mass Municipal Depository Trust, into the hands of some of our community or local banks that actually are kind of part of the fabric of everyday life here in the Commonwealth. And they're sponsoring parades and picnics and soccer teams and little leagues, and they're not the people who are getting 28% interest on the credit card, which is something that for me is it's usury, and it's something we have to stop. So I want to move some money there and kind of infuse Main Street that way economically. And also with the construction industry, it's my plan to take a $500 million piece out of the PRIT fund, the Pension Reserves Fund, and start a bank to spur development in all corners of the Commonwealth, to get our construction people back to work, to create scenarios for good permanent jobs.
As somebody who's got a credit card that's at 28%, I'm
you and I together.
I hope that we get some relief on that. You mentioned that the pension reform as well, and the pensions. This really seems to be, just a huge issue, and in a lot of ways that the crux of the matter. We have this unfunded pension liability, and I know that this, again, is a nationwide problem.
Sure.
As you've been kind of pointing out, Massachusetts not alone in a lot of the problems we're facing.
Sure.
I don't see how Massachusetts or some states are going to be able to pay that in the future.
Well, we're on course right now to have it paid, assuming we get reasonable return of investments by 2028, which is what the law designed for us. So that is not so much a immediate threat to us. Where the threat is that we're actually paying more out than we're taking in from current employees.
Right.
So we have to change the formula, at least prospectively with new hires, to request or to make sure that they pay more of their own pension costs. sometimes it's unfair to public employees because what people don't read about in the paper for the most part is that anyone who's on a public pension here in Massachusetts has foregone Social Security, so they don't get Social Security. The average pension, I think, is $22,500 a year.
Well, this is the thing, right? I mean, so the average pension is $22,500, but what we read about in the Herald is, you know, the guy and he's getting $250,000 and he still wants more.
Right, and so, you know, 97% of the people honestly earn fair and square their pension. Then you have people that maybe serve on a library board for 15 years,
right,
and they go once every 3 months to a meeting or something, and they're getting a stipend, and then they cash those years in as if they were permanent years.
And
that's
outraged.
An abuse.
Yeah,
and that's something that you need to close the loophole on. You want to make sure the pensions moving forward are honestly earned, that we can sustain, our system can sustain by people contributing to it, and you end these loopholes and abuses that have too often sapped the system.
And that's something that, as treasurer, you can have some input into.
Well, you're chair of the Pension Reserves Board, so yeah, you certainly can. You can have a lot of input into changing the rules around pensions, working with the governor and the legislature, and also where you're investing the money and where you're allocating money. And I believe that, you know, economically targeted investments within the borders of the state are a good thing. You know, you might say, I'm going to put X amount of dollars into this fund on Wall Street, and you might be a hero, or as, you know, Charlie Brown, you might be the goat if it goes south. So if you take a portion of that out and spur your own neighborhood economy, there's an intrinsic value to that.
What would you say? Well, actually, let me ask you this first. Senator John Kerry, because that has been much in the news over the last few days. Yes, he has. He has said that he's going to pay his $400,000 some odd dollars. That, of course, was you can't have a senator appearance, whether it was the letter of the law or not. Yeah. Kind of a, you know, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. But as treasurer, if you were treasurer right now, I mean, is that something that you would have said, hey, we got to go after this. We got to find out what he's doing. You need the money.
You know, I can't go out and excoriate big banks, which I have done, because when they were bailed out with public dollars, sometimes they took that money overseas. They didn't spur our economy with it. They kind of took it and sheltered it, and then paid themselves back by raising credit card interest rates on the middle class. And, you know, that's kind of a shelter or a loophole. And what I'm reading about looks like maybe we're looking to go and save ourselves some money. You can't do that. I mean, we're in the business, public officials are in the business of getting as much revenue as we can and then responsibly turning it back out to make a difference in the quality of life of the people that send us, whether it's to D.C. or Beacon Hill or to a local city or town hall or the school department. And, you know that, and we know that. So you can't say one set of rules for us. The rules apply fairly and equally to everyone.
All right, casinos, this is the other big thing. It looks right now, as we sit here today, it looks as if it might not get out of this this conference committee, but a good idea for Massachusetts to have the casinos? It
would be, and it would be a shame. We're losing over $40 billion in potential business with going out to Connecticut and to Rhode Island and to New York. And nice to keep the money at home, keep the jobs at home, keep our neighbors and friends and our people and our families employed, you know.
You know, it's interesting as I speak to you and we talk about the treasurer's role, that it seems as if you might see it as a more activist role, maybe to be a little bit more involved with the governor and the legislature on some of this.
I think you should be. I think you're part of a team, even though you're independently elected. You know, you really have to be communicating at all levels and cross party lines, should you need to try to formulate, you know, we're there to do what's best for the people that sent us there, regardless of, you know, our party affiliation. So I think communication is the key.
Just a moment left. Biggest difference between you and your opponent in the primary, Steve Grossman?
I have public finance experience, and my opponent does not, and the job is about public finance. And I think if you're going to go and elect somebody to be the CFO of the Commonwealth, they should have some experience in public sector financing, and that's what I'm bringing.
Steve, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, no, glad that you were out and about in central Massachusetts today, and glad that you could make some time to stop in with us.
Thanks for having us.
Right here on the Hank Stolz Experience.